Byzantium. I want to talk about this, and I have a quiz for you that we'll talk about at the end of the period. And I want to kind of show you this. This is Byzantine Empire at the death of Justinian. And so here we go, Constantinople, Byzantium, Istanbul. And so what happened in the life of Justinian is that in the West, this is mostly being attacked by other people, the Franks, the Visigoths, the Germanic tribes, and so on. And so in the East, it remains relatively stable and relatively prosperous, excuse me. And so Emperor Justinian takes it upon himself to restore the ancient Roman Empire from Byzantium. And it was kind of an interesting story because it almost didn't happen. There was a revolt in Constantinople, and there was rioting in the streets. And it looked kind of like, probably like the attack on the United States Capitol on steroids. And Justinian was going to leave. He had a wife, Theodora, and she persuaded him. She said, no, you stand, you fight, you put down the rebellion, you restore order. You're the emperor, that's your job. And so basically that's what he did. She was the power behind the throne. And there is an old saying that behind every great man is a great woman. That's kind of archaic and kind of would you say sexist? And so okay, but that's how things were, and we'll just not try to be too politically correct. But she was really the power behind the throne. And so, well, we'll kind of go back a little bit. What we have to kind of go back to what we were talking about with, let me pull this out of the way. And so we go back to Constantine. And what happens in Constantine's time is that they actually standardize Christianity. They gather up all of the books that comprise today's Bible, and they actually gathered up more than what we see in the Bible today. And so they basically did a lot of scholarship. They kind of figured out which gospels were true according to their belief. So we got 4: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And so we got a lot of other gospels according to St. Thomas, gospels according to almost all of the saints in antiquity. So anyway, it was kind of an interesting time. And so what had to happen in that time? And so this is early 6th century. What we got is that along with that standardization of Christianity, along comes through the next few centuries a kind of way to reconcile Christianity in art and in architecture. And so the interior of San Vitale, looking from Ravenna, Italy. So Justinian, in his quest to rebuild and unify, reunify the Roman Empire, the East versus the West, bottom line, he had to go back into Ravenna. I want to show you where this is on the map, by the way. That's right here. And you see Byzantine Empire at the death of Justinian. So he probably, as you can tell, obviously, retook Ravenna. Actually, Ravenna was occupied and ruled by Germanic people at the time. And so Justinian retakes Ravenna and he builds it into this great Christian city. The Germanic tribes were not Christian, and so they reestablish this. And so San Vitale, probably the most famous of all of the Christian buildings in Ravenna. And as you can see, there's no expense spared. We got a lot of pictures of this. This is out of sequence. Let's go back here. Okay, there's San Vitale looking west. And what you have here is a kind of style of architecture that'll be very common in Christianity. And a lot of folks go by this nomenclature that this is what they call Roman-esque architecture. And so it derives a lot from ancient Rome, has some other innovations that are truly Romanesque and new. But you see what this looks like. Where's the, oh, wrong way. Let me get my pictures right here. All right. Going the wrong way. San Vitale. Here's what I wanted to show. And so this is basically an octagon, and it has an ambulatory. It has what we call these things naves, and here is the apse, and this is what we would call apsidal temple. And basically the apse, this is like the main part. This is where the priest would say the mass. And so anyway, it's on geometry. You can see what this looks like in the flesh. I want to point out a couple of other things, though. This is really about the engineering of the place. And first of all, they come up with the idea of actually new ways of building domes. And this is a dome on pentadives. And this is a dome on squinches, which is actually more of a wall with an archway. So anyway, that's kind of how they build this. And you see the arches, that's a carryover from Roman architecture. The idea of a dome, Roman. What I probably want you to notice, out of all of this, are these. And those are called buttresses. It's not in the floor plan here, they don't show it. But these are buttresses, and these will be used in Christian architecture for 1,000 years or more. We see all of the Gothic cathedrals will use black buttresses, and the way they dress them up in Gothic architecture is that they call them flying buttresses because they appear to be light and in some ways they don't even look like they're supporting weight, but certainly this one does. And what they do is take some of the weight of the structure and they distribute it outward to help hold up the building. It's just a prop is what it is. And so this is San Vitale. Now, I gotta kind of make a decision. Here's another Romanesque. This is in Greece, first quarter of the 11th century. So when was this? 6th century, 11th century, 500 years. They're still building basically in the same way, in this Romanesque style. And see these things right here? Those are the buttresses. And so they're able to go higher and support the weight. And this is how they do it. Use a lot. They got a dome and they use a lot of arches. And one of the characteristics here in Romanesque architecture is that they use tiled roofs, typically terracotta tiled roofs. And so we talked about the Etruscans and all of their artwork made out of terracotta. It's something that they had a lot of, and they had enough clay, enough earth, enough terracotta to be great brick makers. This is brick, not cut stone. And secondly, enough terracotta that they could form these into roof tiles. And so here's some other pictures of San Vitale on the inside, and it is adorned with mosaics and all kinds of ornamentation. And I want you to kind of see this here, because this is going to be the central theme I think we should talk about today. So you see the mosaic of Christ between two angels, and then Saint Vitalis and Bishop Ecclesius. Zoom in. So what the heck is going on? We know Christ is central. We see the angels. We see the saint and the bishop. We see here, I can't zoom in anymore, but we see this halo. We talked about that last time. The idea of a halo being an invention of iconography. It is a symbol that depicts someone who's holy More importantly, if it's Christ, it is the halo on steroids, if you will, because you see the cross embedded in the halo. And so we have the angels here, and they have halos. And this one here has a halo, but not this one. So you would think that this is the bishop, and you can see he's got a model of actually San Vitale in his hands. And so here you go. This is Saint Vitalis, Bishop Ecclesias. And so get back on this stuff. Anything else? Oh. Anything else you notice about Christ? I'll pick it apart. I'll pick it apart. Xander.
Which one of these?
Center. This guy right here.
I thought you might be.
Well, yeah. See,
I was thinking like maybe like that type of direction about like how they're aligned to each other, like how they're positioned to each other. But I don't know. It's just I honestly see that the middle guy was not Jesus, so that's what kind of threw me off. But like I'm thinking somewhere in the direction of like positioning their position to each other, because there's always like this in Christianity. There's always this. Always been something about like someone sitting to someone's right.
absolutely. And that's part of iconography too. A lot of times, and we'll see this will develop and change over the centuries. But in some ways, it kind of remains the same. And I think that's what you're talking about, because what you get here is the development of an iconography that'll help you understand at least Western art for about 1,000 years, because there's not really a whole lot of other art being made except in religion. Now, in the Roman Republic, we saw a lot of different subjects. We saw a vegetable seller, a fruit seller. We've seen an old woman with a basket. We've seen one of the guys who fed the horses at the Hippodrome, Circus Maximus. We saw all kind of people, different strata of the social structure, all the way up to priests, emperors, senators, and so on. And so the range of what was subject for art in the Roman Empire is really kind of broad. And when we get to the Byzantine years, it almost all collapses and is centered on Christianity or some aspect of that. And so, how about this? What could that be? Could it be the world? Could it be a throne? Could it be from the gym where you had those big balls catching something? Just saying. The idea that the world is round. There's a lot of. Oh, Jordan.
Watching over, like you have Jesus and they're like the people we have in that. And then we have the full, which is like the.
Yes. Spot on. Yes. That's another aspect. You hit a lot, cover a lot of ground there. Thank you. Yeah, the idea that Christ is up above us, looking down over us. That's a big thing. So mostly what you'll see in the development of this iconography is that Christ gets placed high. Not only center, he's high, and as this morphs, you'll see some of the ancient techniques reemerge, like making Christ bigger. Not that he's actually taller, but it's his theological size. He's more important. But all of this comes down. You see here in this, excuse me, his hand, a Bible. And that'll become standard in the iconography of Christ for a long time. So anyway, let's talk a little bit more about San Vitale, because it is truly, Ravenna is truly a remarkable place. And they invested a lot of money in. And this kind of becomes the center of a lot of that iconography we talked about. Throne of Maximus, 546, 556. Ivory and wood. So can you imagine the kind of ivory it took to pull this off? And can we zoom in on here? Christ, center. But look at him. He's old here. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the writer of the four Gospels. And instead of sitting on top of the world, he's got the globe, the orb in his hand, and in this hand, the Bible. Why would he have a Bible? Because in Christianity, they believe that the coming of Christ was foretold by prophets in the Bible itself is the Old Testament. Will send a Messiah. And so anyway, that's why the Bible is there. In San Vitale, they actually made some mosaics depicting Justinian and Theodora. And so Justinian, Bishop Maximus, and so I don't know, can you read this? You can see Maximanus here. But this is Justinian and the attendants. And the attendants, you can see some weapons here, the shield, advisors, and here on this side, priest, incense burner, one carrying the Bible, another carrying crucifix. And so we, in the Catholic religion, we call him Saint Justinian. And here is the complementary mosaic to Theodora, also in San Vitale. And so here we got Theodora, and we can tell her, and you see she's got a halo. And you see here, and in the one with Justinian, it's not exactly, there's a little bit of, how should I say, a little bit of disagreement on what this means, but this is basically like the collection basket. And it symbolizes that Justinian did all of this as an offering up to God. And so you see, Theodora has something that's kind of similar that way, baptismal font. And so I got a map here. And this kind of goes over what was going on at the time. And in the red, the Byzantine Empire in 527. And you can see this is as far as it goes. And this traces the route of Emperor Justinian and his armies. And they go around here and then they go to, Ravenna. And so that becomes, at least for a while, a provincial capital of the Roman Empire. Then they move south. They recapture Rome. They come up through the Mediterranean. They recapture Rome. They go this way, that way. That's how they get Ravenna. And then they move west. And this is the lands that the Byzantines conquered between 527 and 565. So they really reclaimed a lot of North Africa. And you see some of the provincial capitals, the big cities, and so on. And this is a Byzantine victory, Ravenna, Rome, Naples. Maro? Am I saying that right, Xander?
I'm also not quite sure.
Yeah,
You
it's,
asked for Germany, so I can probably tell you, but I don't speak.
oh, okay, good. Well, me either, as you can tell. And so anyway, these all remain what the Romans would call the barbarian states up here, the Visigoths, the Franks, the Lombards. All of these are all people that had taken this over. But bottom line, you can see that in Justinian's time, it grew from the red and incorporated all of. And so here's some more from Ravenna. Saint Apollinaris amid sheep, mosaic. You see. Halo, actually a crown. Sheep, Sanctus Apollinaris, Saint Apollinaris. And again, what's above everything and center? The symbol of Christ. And so anyway, a lot of places start really decorating or adorning their places of worship with a lot of the same kind of iconography that we see emerge in Justinian's time. And so here's another little bit of iconography that we see with Christ. It's this symbol. it's a blessing, the sign of a blessing, and a sign of peace. And so, and again, the halo, the cross. And so, what I wanted to do, let me end this right there, because I did want to point out something. And that is this slot. Everyone, I'm gonna point this out. Let's get the screen share again. Okay. So this is just before, or maybe early Constantine, Roman art. So how do we get from Christian art that looks like this to art let me screen zoom in. Come on, guys. There, it'll let me do it now. From that to this. So we got Christ the Good Shepherd, and it looks like a classic Greek statue. And then we go to the depiction of Christ. It looks like this. So we talked about these last time, I know. How did they get like that? Well, it's that the priorities change. It goes from that and this. Anyway, I just wanted to remind you that I need to end this show. Say. Yeah, I thought I was doing this. I'll get it back. I promise. And we gotta get this back. And more. Share screen. All right. Backing it up. And so San Vitale, Ravenna, Transfiguration. And so we get from all of that realism, all of that naturalism to something like this. And did they lose all of their artistic ability? Did they lose their capacity to make painting and sculpture so natural or lifelike or ideal? Or what happened? What might that be? Well, I have heard theories, especially when I was in your seats, like 45 years ago. A lot of people really thought that the capacity to do that naturalistic art was a lost skill. And certainly we have times in history where knowledge is lost. And we can think about that, especially in terms of European culture. They go through what they call the Dark Ages. We don't use that term so much anymore, but basically it was where all of the systems broke down. And so a lot of the culture, a lot of skills people were basically illiterate. And people didn't have the organized government, so they became real tribal. They lost a lot of the technology to mass produce food. They lost a lot of technology on how to organize people into armies and so on. And this was kind of thrown in the mix as being something else that got lost. But I think the actual answer to this is that their priorities changed. And they had some real issues to deal with when making art, and especially investing a lot of their energy in putting together places like this, in Mount Sinai and in Ravenna and so on. A problem. And so here's part of the problem. We got Justinian, who is an emperor, but you got to make Christ the king. He's over the emperor. So we'll put Christ way up on top, and we'll give him a special kind of halo. But what we'll end up doing here too is that right now we'll give him a beard. And it's the idea not so much that he's old, but that he's wise. And so these characters are, in comparison to classical Greek and Roman art, they look cartoonish. So that makes that question I just raised a moment ago. Did they lose this skill? Was it what they would call a lost art? And I argue that, again, the priorities changed, and it has a lot to do with how do you deal with the second commandment and graven images and false idols and things along those lines. And so you want to get the idea across, but you're really not trying to make this into, as we saw in Roman painting, a window into another reality. They're not trying to trick you. They're trying to represent an idea, which makes this an icon instead of an illusion. And so, yes.
Were beards always symbol of wisdom, like before this one? I know today you were talking about how like older teachers have
Yes.
wisdom. It's the same thing for Jesus. Your wisdom was before.
Sure. I think that even in ancient times in Mesopotamia, we see a lot of the royal figures have beards, and they had braided beards. And it is, I think, has been traditionally an idea of wisdom. And it can be used for age as well. But I think that in this case, it is truly about wisdom. because Christ was, and I don't think there's much disagreement. He was 33 when he was crucified. So, you know, anyway, I got another, I put this website in the PowerPoint. It's going to come in handy for you guys. In its day, the mosaic pictured above was revolutionary. Before 5th century, portraits of Christ normally pictured him as an adult flanked by saints or books or scrolls, the example. But in the 5th century, and then much more frequently in the 6th, an image type develops where he is a child held by his mother on her knee, or much more often on her lap. And so let's zoom in on this. Website. So this is it. Center, we got Christ. And it says that he's as a scroll or a book, which is, as I said earlier, the idea that his life is foretold in the scriptures. That'll be a scroll, that'll be a book, but that's why it's there. The other thing is this sign of peace or a blessing. That's what he's doing right here. And he's a child, but how do you depict a child who knows that he is the Son of God and he is as the Son of God, all knowing? And does he ever have a time when he's like kind of unaware that of his role in this religion, in history? So they kind of have to make him something of a small adult. And certainly with Whitney, you were asking about the beard. It's his kind of solves the problem. He's a child, you don't have to put a beard, but you still got to make him wise. And so you give him gestures and you put an adult face on him. Never truly make him look like a real 1 or 2 year old baby. And so this is an interesting site, and basically the wisdom in this, the throne of wisdom, a sculptural tradition, but one sees its influence on two-dimensional works, such as this mosaic. And so there we go, virgin enthroned. Same kind of thing. What else do you notice? There's his scroll. Here's his indication of a piece. He's got the halo. He's even looking a little bit more adult-like. But the wisdom that is not there as a beard, it's as the throne that his mother is seated on. So they're both part of what was foretold in the Bible. She brought him in, virgin birth, etc. And so this is, they speculate, but they think this is the mother of God written in here too. So it gets complicated. And you got to read that as the throne of wisdom, because everybody knows that they were poor. Christ, after all, was born in a manger. And Joseph was a carpenter. not a general, not an emperor, not even a magistrate, a carpenter. Very simple, very humble. But you wouldn't get the humility or the humbleness from these depictions, because they, as oops, I'm gotta figure out how to navigate around these things. Anyway. Gotta make sure my share is there. Yeah, we're good. So anyway, this is like really complicated. And I'll spend a lot of time on it because I think if you understand how iconography works, it will be a key to understanding much art around the world, because almost every kind of art, almost every kind, has its own set of icons. Hinduism, for example, and Buddhism, they have icons to represent figures in the belief system. We see a lot of iconography in Egyptian art, and we kind of touched on that, but kind of based on, say, for like the color of the person being represented. Forgot the guy's name here. The green God that lets souls into the afterlife. When we saw the Book of the Dead, there was a guy on the right-hand side and he was green. But that represents that he is a particular God. We see the Anubis, we see a lot of other signs and symbols. We'll see somebody that has a headdress with the snake coming out of the top, the asp, and that means that that's Pharaoh, royalty. Anyway, Christian art works just like that. And so that's why I brought a lot of this stuff in. And before I go any farther, I want to talk about something that goes back to Justinian's time as well. The Hagia Sophia. And let's see, slideshow from current slide. Make sure my share did not move. It did. Okay. The Hagia Sophia, this was something that was created in Justinian's time as well. Right at home, right there in modern day Istanbul, then called Constantinople, previously called Byzantium. And you can see all of the architectural devices, all of the engineering that was developed over 500-600 years of Roman building, the domes, the archways, hypostyle, columns, etc. Vaulted archways. And here is the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, Istanbul. This is an aerial view, obviously. You see some similarities to San Vitale in Ravenna, but it's really, truly something completely different. And because Constantinople was the center of Rome at the time, and thus the center of Christianity, Justinian wanted to build the best, biggest cathedral in the empire of the world. And so this is what he got. It took him a long time to build this because when they were building it, the roof caved in. Just a sign that building domes is not particularly easy. But here's what it looks like on the inside. And so what it is today is a mosque. And so as such, we see these discs all around the perimeter, and they are Islamic. They are there to, they are, it's almost if you were talking about Christianity, they would have like a proverb or a parable or something, a prayer, etc. And so that's what's around the perimeter. And this is what it looks like today. And I read recently that, well, this was opened up in 1935 as a World Heritage Site, and you could go visit. And I read recently that they turned it back into a mosque and not a tourist attraction. So I don't know where that stands, but it becomes a model for many. I'm going to zoom in on this. As you can see, some of the old iconography still exists here, but mostly it doesn't. It is truly a mosque. And again, like I was saying, for a long time, we didn't put pews or benches. They never existed in a mosque. When you put a prayer blanket inside. But this becomes kind of the prototype for a number of other mosques. And I want to point out here that this is the original, and this had been, after it had been converted into a mosque, we put the minarets on the outside. They're not original. That's an addition from Islam. And so the Sultan Ahmed Mosque, this is also in Istanbul, and it was constructed 1609, which is like 1,000 years after the Hagia Sophia. And so it's Hagia Sophia becomes really the architecture model for a lot of mosques. And here's another one. I practiced saying this a long time. Pronounced silage and Menji. Anyway, another mosque in Turkey built on the model. And so there's more about it. And this is 1550 again, another 1,000 years after it was after Hagia Sophia. So I'm looking at the time, and I told you I had a quiz. And that's this. I'm asking you about this image, identified by subject matter, size, media, date, place of creation. Most importantly, describe the elements of the iconography, which is pretty much what I've been trying to tell you, talk about today, but there are variations in the icons. And so some of them, as we said, would depict Christ with a beard or a shaven face, whether they want to be young or wise, and so on. And so anyway, This is a start slide in the book, so you got one knocked out. And I gave you some website links to where to find some of that information, the iconography. Third, would you characterize this artwork as ideal, naturalistic, or symbolic, iconic? And why? And we've been talking about that here too. And finally, as usual, list your sources as endnotes. When I assigned quiz 2, I had gotten some requests or examples. And so this is more or less right out of a quiz that I gave last year at this time. And it was on this one, and here's a copy of that starred slide. And this is Christ blessing. There's that hand that's like this. This is Christ blessing. Mount Sinai, Egypt. We saw some other examples from the monastery of St. Catherine. So anyway, this is the example, and here is what the student wrote. And it basically says, I found this this Christ Pantocrator from St. Catherine's Monastery. This is kind of blending some of the questions together. And so anyway, this showing Jesus in this way is mainly an Eastern Orthodox conception. We'll talk more about some of that on Wednesday. And so it talks about, the dual nature of Christ, illustrating traits of both man and God. So this is really the kind of stuff I want. Now, I didn't ask on the original one, you'd characterize it as ideal, naturalistic, or symbolic. So you're on your own with that question, but I think it's kind of obvious by how the representation comes across and some of the things that we talked about in here today. And so this is the one I want you to analyze. And so I want you to submit your answers as a file upload. And when you do that and you get it in on time, then I can actually put notes on there and talk with you about what you wrote. If you're sending them other ways or as email and stuff, I don't really get a chance to do that for the record. So this is your question. It's due Wednesday night, 11:59 p.m. So we'll meet one more time before this is due. And I like doing that. If you've got any questions, I'll see you. And so one other thing here, and is this on the share? And I want to kind of point a little something out here. And there's a link, a guide to iconography as well. And it looks like we're still on the share. Good. Any questions? I kind of got through this a little more quickly, but that's okay. You guys are ahead of my other sections. When you get days off like Maryville reaches out and stuff, it kind of messes up my overall plan. That's not on you. DocX, PDF. It's the two that I can dig into through Canvas. Well, are you gonna get mad that I shortchanged you by about 13 minutes today? No. Okay, because you paid for it, you know. All right, well, use that time wisely, and I'll see you on Wednesday.